Welcome to the Jeff Knows Inc. Entrepreneurial Podcast with your host, Jeff Lopes. Jeff has over 2 decades experience as a serial entrepreneur, building brands like Kimura from his home basement to a multi-million-dollar global brand that has sold over 250,000 pairs of boxing gloves. Jeff's here to educate, guide, and drive you on the process of bringing your ideas and dreams to reality with the inspiring stories from some of the top business minds.
Welcome to episode 145 of the Jeff Knows Inc. podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Lopes. Super excited to have on today Angelo Sisco, the host of I Am Alpha Hippie podcast. Incredible conversation, incredible story. Sit back, everyone, and enjoy. We are live on the Jeff Knows Inc. podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Lopes. Super excited to have on today Angelo Sisco. What is up, brother?
Oh, my dear friends, super grateful here to be with you. It's a beautiful Monday morning in San Clemente, and to get to chat with you is always a pleasure.
It's going to be a fun conversation today. Let's start off. There's so many different layers of you, and we're going to talk about your upbringing, the whole idea of your podcast and everything you're doing with your coaching and all that. But let's start off with where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Chicago, just outside of Chicago, in a town called Melrose Park. It's right near O'Hare Airport, and I'm 37 now. I spent, 36 years in a 1-mile radius. So to say I really know that area, I really do. Yeah.
So growing up, do you have any siblings?
I do. I have one sister. She's 17 months older than me. So she's July of 82. I'm December of 83. So we're very close in age and love and timeline.
I love it. So how was your childhood growing up in Chicago? Because I don't know the area, but there is peaks of Chicago being, very crime driven and up and down, right? So did you grow up having any of that affect you at all?
I would say that I grew up in a very intense environment. My father went to prison when I was 5 years old for all of the 90s. So my dad went to jail when I was 5, and he came home when I was 16. So right before I started kindergarten, August 28th of 1989, my father was arrested, and then he was paroled December 23rd of 1999. And so there was that. And along with that, my father served 11 years in the federal penitentiary. And so being in that world, crime and that sort of gangster-like world was very common for me. Violence, aggression, and even the other men that became my mentors, their dads were in jail. Their grandfathers were in jail. My best friend, his dad was in jail. This was a very, although abnormal to most people, very normal
to you.
And my father's temperament was at that time. Now he's a little bit older. He's a little bit, more gentle, just very aggressive, very violent. And when I say violent verbally and physically, it was just how he's shown up in the world. And so his parenting style mimicked how he showed up in the world.
Let's dive into that a bit.
Sure.
When he did his time and came out of incarceration, when he came out of jail, was he automatically a big part of your life again? What was that like those first few years or year when he came out of jail?
Sure. So my family vacations, 80% of them were to visit prison. So my mother, who didn't work up to that point, got a job. My grandmother, her mother, moved in with us to basically raise my sister and I. And so we would see my dad once or twice a year, depending on where he was in the country, because he moved a few different places, depending on usually in federal prison, you have a security like where you are. So when you first go to prison, especially if you've been convicted of violent crimes, you're in a higher security prison. And then as you serve your time, they bring you down a little bit. And so my father was in more of a maximum security type of prison early on. And then as he moved, they were less lenient as far as like high security and things like that. And we would have every Tuesday at 4:30 he would call. That's when they still called collect. And every Sunday my mother would have us write him letters. And so that was our upbringing. And he was very hard on me from a very young age. I had rites of passage, if you will, given to me and put in front of me before he even went to prison to stand up to the bully and really learn to trust myself. And so for a long time, and I continued through that, my father was very strong on removing my innocence. Now, for many years, I felt that was terrible and that he took something away from me. And now as a 37-year-old man, I would smile and take all the abuse and beatings again. If I knew what they were going to really be for me, and if I was able to
explain that a bit more.
So here's what my father calls my epiphany moment. So any recollection I have of my father, for the sake of this conversation, is really, ages 3, 4, and 5, when you could actually develop some sort of memories. So one example is we grew up in Chicago, and just outside of Chicago is a town called Lake Geneva, or a lake called Lake Geneva.
Yeah.
And the town that surrounds it's called Fontana, which is sort of like the Hamptons. When you make money, like this is where you want to end up, and you know that you're doing great. And we had a house and a boat there at the time. And then when it was raining, though, what my dad would do is he would rent us a room at the Cool Hotel. So then we had a place to go swimming and play all day. And this one day, it's just my father and I enjoying this experience, not my uncle and his kids or anyone else. And so I'm in the pool, and my father sees 3 young boys picking on me. And I didn't, I'm just a young kid. I don't understand what's happening, and just kids aren't being kind to me. So I go swim away from them and just go about my day. And unbeknownst to me, my father was watching this unfold, and he became very angry because he saw my response to what was happening, that I was becoming bullied or challenged by the external, and my response was to run away. And that's all I really knew. And my father, I found out much later, grew up in a very similar world where he once believed that just kids picked on him because he was overweight and he didn't find much refuge at home. So he watched this happen. And the same way that he found refuge, he thought that he would teach me refuge. And my father found refuge in facing his bullies through violence and just hitting them. And so as these 3 boys left the pool to go to like the changing shower area before you go back to your room, my father pulled me out of the pool, Jeff, and walked me up to the 3 kids. And I had no idea where we were going and what we were doing. And he told me to hit one of the kids. And from a very young age, he taught me to throw punches and things like that. This was just a part of my life. This is what my father thought was life skills. I didn't get Boy Scout patches. I got patches for learning how to throw my weak hand, in my left hand, not my right, And so I hit one of the kids, and the kid immediately hit me back. And I looked up at my father, and he said, "Don't stop." and I fought all 3 kids that day, and I won. And my father was extremely proud of me. And just that little saying, "Don't stop," has become my anchor in my entire life. No different than how Forrest Gump felt about "Run, Forrest, Run." And that was my origin hero story I tell people. And although it took me many years to not use it or demonstrate it violently, being someone that has a deep-rooted belief that when the bully shows its face that he doesn't stop has served me quite well in my 37 years on this planet. I wouldn't change it. Although I wish the methods were a little bit different. The lesson was very life-changing.
It's crazy as we get older and we sit back and look at certain moments or certain trigger points in our life that have altered us as men or as adults. It's crazy how you can take those moments when you're a child and break them down as you're growing through your youth and through your teens and still find pain in them, and you'll learn to actually take the lessons from them as we get older.
Yes.
And I love that. I mean, and some people are going to hear this story and kind of be like, no violence for your kids. But I get it. I get it as a dad. I get it as my son. I'll give you an example. I mean, I don't do that, the violent aspect, but I'm everything he's been through mentally, physically, with all his issues growing up, being diagnosed with CP and all that. From day one, I've been the one where he'd walk in a room and I'd be like, and he'd put his head down and I lift his chin up and like, look that person in the eye and say hi to them in front of him, embarrass him. But I would put him in a situation where I would do it consistently. Open that door for that person, say hi to that person. And it would constantly, and now he'll walk in the room with his head up with confidence because I instilled it from a very young age. And I think it's very important. That's what your dad did is at a next level, but I do understand the lesson there. And I appreciate the lesson there. And I think you've taken those lessons to better yourself as a man, which has made you very unstoppable with everything else you're doing in life. So I appreciate that aspect of it. So growing up as a teen, did you get yourself in a lot of trouble, or you calm that self down?
I was in constant trouble, Jeff.
Yeah.
The thing about me, though, that was very interesting is I would constantly be getting in some sort of altercation, whether it be another student or a teacher, because I was taught to be hyper aggressive by my father. It was, if I grew up overweight and I lost 100 pounds when I was 25. So when I was overweight and kids would make fun of me, I was instructed that I wasn't allowed to say anything back. I wasn't even allowed to push them. I had to get up and punch them right in the face no matter what. And so it came as obviously a great shock to a lot of people and kids that I would just get up out of my desk and just, like my father told me, and I would hit someone right across the face and I would get suspended. But the thing about it that was really interesting is I got straight A's. I got really good grades. So it puzzled the teachers that I was like that. And so what my parents did is they said, oh, he's acting this way because you're not challenging him enough. So in grammar school, K through 8, I would do my sister, who was 2 years ahead of me in grade because of our birthday time. I would go to her class for English and math. So I was very, very intelligent, yet I had this aggression because this is what my daddy told me to do. I didn't know. I didn't have another mechanism to do. This is what my hero told me to do. So if the teacher told me no, it really didn't hit me because it didn't matter to me. It didn't matter that the principal told me no, because this is what my daddy told me to do. You can't underride or override the highest instructor in my life. My master told me to do this. Sorry. But I got such good grades that they let me stay. Like I would have a beautiful report card, and then when it came to behavior, those were the negative marks.
When did that shift in your life? What age did you actually shift away from the violence? Don't say a year ago.
I'll tell you that I will tell you the truth.
Yeah.
It hasn't gone away. The way I express it is differently.
Explain that to me.
So when I would be violent or aggressive, it was just an uncontrollable, like you let the dog out of a cage. And yet the older I've gotten, I've studied anger and aggression and really learned to use it as a tool where, let's just face it, for me in my experience, and I would imagine many others, when I'm angry, I could do anything. There's no limiting belief when I'm angry, or I see, my work is primarily with man. Give me a man that could really embrace and understand his anger and not let his anger pull him on a leash. He could move his anger around. He could accomplish anything. Just like when you were telling me on our show with your work with your son, there was I would imagine there was a bit of, it was love. And also too, you're going to show him, you and your son are going to show him that he's not behind anything. And, that sort of,
yeah,
that's beautiful. And when we're able to use that beautifully, we can move mountains. To me, that's when someone could take, especially a man, their aggressive or anger and use it to be assertive. That's when they actually become a voodoo child. They could chop down an edge of a mountain remember, that song, I'm a voodoo child by Jim. You could stand up to an edge of a mountain and chop it down with the edge of your hand, that feeling there. And so I still feel the initial dynamite, yet now I'm able to use my mind, my words, and come off assertive and direct, yet not use it violently or over aggressively. And it's still there. It's just how it's expressed is in a much better way. I did not, because it does serve me. I moved to California. I've been an entrepreneur for 20 years. I'm 37, right? Like all these things to create these businesses, to trust myself. Hey, I couldn't have done it if I didn't have a little fireball in me.
Do you think that if those moments of your childhood didn't happen with your dad, that you would still have that? And why am I saying that, Angelo, is because it's that mindset of the top athletes or the top entrepreneurs. They're born with that drive, that fire. Like I came from a loving, extremely loving, not very wealthy, but extremely loving family that my dad was always there, always giving me so much attention. But I still have that, like, I hate losing.
Yes.
If me or you were to go to head in anything, I don't want to lose to you. That's just my mindset. Losing is not acceptable. And I actually instilled it in my children.
Right.
A loss is a lesson that you're not going to make again. And I have that. And I've always been like that since a kid. Like as far as I can remember, mm-hmm. I was the kid where, it's funny, we're talking about like violence and stuff, and I was a kid in like grade 5. And I don't know if we talked about this. I would be in the schoolyard and get my ass kicked by a bigger kid, but I would have it locked in my head where the next day when he was playing soccer or doing something, I would come from behind and jump him and beat the living shit out of him, just for my self-belief, just to know that I could do it. And I've always been like that, where I couldn't lose, no matter a sport or anything. It's like I would keep doing it until I was the best at it, or at least at the top of that level. So, but that was just in me. I no one's really ever taught me that. No one ever put me in a situation where I was forced to turn to that. So do you not have to look at yourself? And now that, man, obviously growing up, you don't think, obviously your environment has a lot to do with it, but you don't think that's just that drive, that hustle, that burn is just built in you?
I believe that it could be born with, yet at the same time, there may
Triggers,
have been
triggers.
one event that set it off. No different than I said, like Forrest Gump. Like finally that one thing got him to overcome the bully.
Yeah, I love it.
And there's some or overcome the challenge, right? A bully and some sort of resistance and challenge are really the same thing. The bully is the symbol, and you found a way for your brain to do it. I found a way for my brain to do it. You found Forrest found his mechanism, right? And then that's what high performers do. We have a mechanism that we have that started, and then we learn how to condition and sharpen over the years. And then no matter what happens, that's our side piece deep down that gives us a seed of confidence and self-esteem.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love it. So let's get into we got to our teens. Let's get into our young adult. Your 20s. Where'd you start off career-wise? Where'd you start off? What was your first jobs? And when did that trigger to turn into an entrepreneur?
Great. My first job was I wasn't much of an athlete. Okay. I was overweight, wasn't going to be the star of anything. My first job when I was 10 years old, I cleaned up a local barber shop because we really didn't have any money. So I had to hustle to figure that out. At 12, my dad told me I needed to start making more money. It wasn't enough to add to what I was supposed to do. So I got a second job at a deli restaurant. And this was very important. I worked there from 12 to I was 19. This man that I wound up working for took a major role as a mentor for me. I called him. I still remember this. I called him every day for 3 weeks for a job. He kept telling me no. And then my dad told me that I couldn't have a sleepover with one of my friends until I got a job. So I had my mother drive me there a few blocks from the house. And I begged this man to hire me that I wouldn't let him down. He found out later that my father was in prison. Guess what? His father was in prison when he was growing up. So he completely took to me, this beautiful man named Danny. And then he had a son. His son is a decade older than me, which is my favorite age for mentorship. Find someone 10 years older. That's my key usually to get a great one. And then so when I was done working with his father, I went and worked with him at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, learning clerking and trading futures of the NASDAQ. So I spent,
how old are you?
17 was the first time I went down there. So I know, and this is back in the day when it was still pit trading. I know like Dan Aykroyd, Eddie Murphy trading places, the whole ARB, screaming, jumping, way different world than just the headsets and all this stuff. And so I got to be there during those times, the Wild West. And I spent my early part of my 20s in there. When I was 20, late 20s, right before 21, I was in a bad motorcycle accident. I was hit by a landscaping truck, and my left side of my body was very messed up. I have 10 screws in a plate and all new skin reconstruction on the lower leg. They almost wanted to cut it off. And so I was in the hospital for 2 months, rehab for 5 months, learning how to walk again. And that was a very pivotal time for me, not only becoming a 21, 22-year-old young man, and then trying to rethink where my life was going to be at that point. I didn't work for a long time. And so I went back to the Mercantile Exchange and traded and did that. Lost a bunch of money. Just really wasn't what it really needed, for me at that time. I just didn't have it. And also too, by that time, my parents also got divorced. And as a young man, that really hit me much harder than I really thought it would, because I had such an identity wrapped up around the pride that I had for my family, that my parents were still married despite my father not being in prison. And I didn't have the understanding of love and relationship at that time, because I was never in such a long-term relationship that, hey, if I didn't see my wife for 2 years, let alone 11 years on the regular, how could we ever, right? Like just, just, oh my goodness. And so I went through a really dark period because my dad left my mother, and I was very disappointed in my hero at that time. It was very sad for me that he left my mother, and I moved home to be with my mother. I'm a mama's boy. I'm Team Maria. And so she was going through her sadness, and then I ate food to go through mine. That was my coping mechanism. I would just eat because I didn't know how to communicate my feelings. I didn't even understand what any of this sort of higher level emotional recognition and things like that.
Where did the weight shoot up to at that point?
I got up to 300 pounds in 2008.
How tall are you?
5'9".
Yeah.
Okay, so I was, very, very large. And I watched the movie called 300, and I saw all these amazing guys. And what really took me about the movie 300 was how many people were in shape, right? I've seen a bunch of action movies yet. It's usually like one main guy that's a stud, and the rest of them look like jabronis or just the bad guy, right? And so I started doing research, and I found this gym called Jim Jones out of Utah that they trained all those guys. And then I did some more digging and found out Jim Jones was a part of this thing called CrossFit. Come January 5th, 2009, I was done doing research. It was the first Monday of that year, and I began a weight loss journey. That was all me doing CrossFit on my own, and I lost 95 pounds in 7 months. And I had another business at the time that was in the evenings. And so by that time, I had a business that sold pizza slices to drunks right outside of clubs in Chicago. So if you were drunk and you came out, there was a pizza truck. They were huge slices. We would sell them. And then, it was all cash business. I fed the police precincts around and fed all the valets of the clubs. So they all took good care of me. They let me park wherever I wanted. And we got up to 2 trucks. I had employees. So I had a lot of time to focus on health and fitness. And so in 2009, I devoted myself to that. And then I was like, man, I would love to start sharing this with people, because it was very organic. People in my neighborhood saw me differently. And I was just working outside with people for free. And I was like, man, why can't this be my next career? This feels so good. It gives me life. And so that summer, July 2009, I started training people outside for a fee. I kept the pizza business going because it was already going. When it got colder, which it does in Chicago, which you're aware of because you're in Canada, sure enough, in September, I rented a racquetball court space for about 13 months. And I came to a point with the racquetball court space where I was just growing out of it. And also, too, wanted more control of my hours, because being inside a rec center or a village hall, we're closed for voting. And I was like, I'm done with this. And so November 2010, I opened up O'Hare CrossFit. I'm so happy to say that she's still there. I sold it before I moved to California, but I had a beautiful decade inside the CrossFit space, doing everything I really wanted to do there.
Love it. I love it. I love it. Let's fast forward a bit now. And there's a couple of things I want to go back to and talk about, but let's fast forward a bit. Alpha Hippie. Where'd you get that name? How did that all become a podcast and your next venture?
Sure. So around 2014, so I opened up the gym in 2010, and my gym grew really fast. I was in just before Boutique Fitness and CrossFit had sponsorship. So I was like, and around my area, there was nothing else. I was the first. Yeah. And so by the time money and exposure got into CrossFit, I already had things figured out as far as like what it would be. And then around 2014, I realized that I was being, we weren't growing as fast. Now, keep in mind, I was growing in a bubble. So as fast was still growing, just not as astronomical. And I turned into a real big victim. Now that I understand that I was blaming my employees, I was mad at the community. I was just angry.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that I was the problem. That was the hardest thing for me. In most of my life, the hardest thing for me is just removing my ignorance. Once the ignorance is removed and I know what I have to go do, I'm all in. And so I stumbled upon a book called Emotional Intelligence 2.0, which for me is the way to get a business or logical man to start appreciating mindfulness or inner work.
Yeah.
Right? That's how you say it to someone without making it woo-woo at first. And so I read this book, and then I realized that I lacked something called self-awareness. And I go, okay, I'm going to go find this self-awareness thing. And so self-awareness or self-actualization journey began. And that's really started with me with books and reading and, tests and things like that. And then in 2016, it was my first big investment time in myself. I invested $5,000 to go to a more mindful businessman retreat and really started learning that. And throughout that year of 2016, I must have invested almost $100,000 in myself and my growth. I anything that American Express would say yes to, I did. And thank God it's a charge card and not a credit card. So I was, as long as I could swipe, I knew I had 30 days to figure it out. And the more I was growing, the more I saw this growth. So it motivated me to keep going deeper and investing in these experiences, and even understanding that investing in myself was not a cost or expense. It was an investment.
Yeah.
And the higher level that I was willing to invest was basically saying that I was willing to invest on me. And I came home from Chicago, Jeff, from this little retreat I did out in Southern California, barefoot. Right. I was never barefoot. I wore Jordans, or at least hope my mother could afford the Jordans. Yeah. Right. But just, I never was barefoot and kumbayaing and sitting in a lotus position. Yeah. I kneeled. I was a Catholic kid. Okay. This stuff was not there. And one of my friends was hanging out with me, and he made fun of me a little bit at first. And I said, F you don't understand this because you're not an alpha hippie. And I said, wow, that's me. That's who I want to be. I don't want to be such a hippie that I'm only hoping things happen to me. And I don't want to be such an alpha that I turn into Gordon Gekko and everyone hates me. I want to have a little bit of both. And I went online to look, and I was like, man, I'm going to buy a shirt that says alpha hippie. No shirts. I said, no big deal. I drew up the logo, the first version, and went on Fiverr, had a guy make it the right, and all that. And because I had the gym, I had access to printers for clothing, and I printed out 100 shirts. And what I did with these 100 shirts is I would send them to all my friends, or any of these continued retreats that I wound up going to all over the world. I would bring a little extra duffel bag just for shirts to pass out to people. And at first, people would just take a picture of them wearing them, tag me on Instagram, and I would ask them to define what an alpha hippie was to them.
Yeah.
And it was a beautiful way to sort of begin building a tribe of like-minded people that could identify with being an alpha hippie. Fast forward a few months, that by this time the gym was rocking, I wasn't such a DICK, and everything was going great. So I had time to really put passion and heart into alpha hippie. And so the podcast began, And that was all just, it wasn't fancy, just me wanting to stay connected with this part of me that didn't necessarily mean that I had to go away on a retreat or anything. It was really just selfish of my journey to continue on the path, because I know if I'm going to speak to someone and show up a certain way, that I needed to continue to
your growth
accountable.
Yeah.
And then I took it to, man, I would love to share this knowledge that I've been able to grow. And then in 2017, I decided, okay, well, what is frustrating me now in the world? So when I first opened the gym, or when I move into any entrepreneur endeavor, what I like to think about is, what problem am I solving? And the problems that I want to solve are the things selfishly that make me the most angry. And so first it was obesity and people not feeling that their bodies were capable. And the next thing for me was, I become, and still do, this is why I moved even deeper into this, a very deep frustration with men when they are not showing up stable and confident and stepping into all of their duties with enthusiasm and enjoyment. And instead of just being angry at them, I made the first course for men, and we just ran it with guys from the gym, and it was amazing. I ran 3-4 different cohorts of that, and that's what really began the Alpha Hippie journey.
I love it. It's just and it's really cool understanding the meaning and the story behind it. Because when you hear the word Alpha Hippie, it's yin and yang. You're trying to understand the whole meaning of it, right? So I love it. What does fatherhood mean to you?
Fatherhood for me is the thing I really believe that every man prepares for. His whole life is set to prepare him for that position. Means everything to me. Our modern lives are beautiful. They have convenience, and they also create more complexity against nature than I think most people really need and are capable of living. And for me, I look back at these last 37 years, and they've all been here to sharpen my sword to be a father. So that I can know what I need to be, and sometimes know what I do not need to be.
I love it.
So it's my, right now, my son's almost 2, and man, it's the best, because it's the ultimate self-check. I tell everyone, my son, I call him my king, because my job is to serve him, because I model what a king does so that he knows how to be a king. I don't even talk to him. I don't even call him boy. I don't speak to him like he's a boy. I speak to him like he's a man, because I am raising a man. I am not raising a boy. It's beautiful. It's everything to me. It helps me. It is my ultimate teacher. He is, and being a father is.
I love it. I mean, that's essentially my mindset. A lot of people say this all the time to me, Angelo, is my son Tiago people will look at how driven I am, or how, like, I'm up at 4:30, like, they understand my drive, and people are like, Tiago was meant to be your son because the way you drive yourself, you're able to push him past his, what everybody called his limits or self-beliefs or labels, and you passed all that. But then I turn around and say, I look at my son, and he's made me a better man, better father, better human. Everything that he's taught me has made me at a different level that I thank him every day for. And everything he's been through, and it's been such a hard journey at times, I wouldn't change anything at all. I would not go back and change a moment of it, because it's built us this connection we have where our bond is just unbreakable, our bond.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I appreciate that. If something were happening to you today, in a few words, how would you want to be remembered, described by your loved ones?
That's such an interesting question. I just wrote a book just in case that something did happen to me. And it really was. The book that I just finished, it's an editing. It's a memoir basically to my son with the most rewarding thing that I've learned in my 37 years. And so for me, how I would want to be remembered is someone that, despite being human, my own human faults, I came from love in as many instances as I did, and someone that did what he said he was going to do. I want to be known to have a lot of integrity.
Yeah.
I want people to respect me. I want my wife to lust for me. And I want my son to believe deep down that I wore the cape of being his hero until he's ready to be his own hero.
I love integrity because that's something I think we lack a lot of, and we don't really, a lot of people don't hold themselves accountable.
Yes.
And integrity is something that's very, very powerful. And yeah, I love that. And I love the whole cape thing because I'm a huge superhero guy. You can see Superman back there.
Yes, sir. Yeah,
Love it. I love it. I love it. This has been a great conversation, Angelo. I appreciate it, man. I coming into every podcast, I'm as curious as possible. I try not to learn as little as I can about the person. So it's an open book, and you really dive into understanding somebody's journey and how they got to where they got to. So, man, you got a great story, and you're obviously an incredible man, and you're doing incredible things, and you have a bright future. I mean, you're only 37. You're still, I mean, we're not that far apart. I'm 44, but I feel like you have ages and a long journey of helping a lot of people along your way. So I appreciate you, brother.
Dude, oh my goodness, Jeff. I appreciate you so much. And you continue to be a inspiration for me and a mentor to me, even from afar, as someone that I really, cherish and take their advice. So thank you for seeing me as I wish to be seen. And it means a lot coming from a man of your caliber.
Appreciate it, man. Anything you want to leave the audience with?
I would love them to, first and foremost, thank you so much, anyone that's taken time out of your day to listen to this. Alpha Hippie is, my flag of where you could find me and the work that I do. And any feedback, I'm open to. And when I say feedback, it does not necessarily mean flattery. And so when I say feedback, give it to me straight, because the straighter you could give it to me, the better I could grow. And that's all I'm interested in.
Yeah, I love it. On all our show notes, I'm going to put all the information, how to get a hold of Angelo, how to get a hold of his site, social media, Alpha Hippie, his podcast, all that stuff will be on our links. And great conversation, brother. I appreciate you, man. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. You're most welcome.
That's a wrap for today. I want to thank our guest, Angelo, for being such an incredible guest, such an incredible story, such a fun conversation. What a great conversation today. If you guys enjoy this conversation as much as I have, like all weeks, help us build this podcast. Tell your friends, tell your family, spread the word. Leave a review. 5 stars would be absolutely amazing. We love spending time with the staff, reading all the reviews. Until next week, guys, keep moving forward.